describing how he's going bald, but also how he's losing control of the ship of state, because the helm can also be a wheel for steering this ship, and the storm accentuates his loss of control. There's also lines 44 to 46. Lear says, I am bound upon the wheel of fire that mine own tears do scour like molten lead. So Lear is being tortured and in hell. This passage brings up images of devilish torture, devices employed as punishment for his errors in judgment and even sins. Even his tears wound him. He compares them to molten lead, which burn when it's liquefied. This is also a symbol and a reference to Ixion, who was a king and killed his stepfather and then went mad with guilt. Then when Zeus forgave him, he tried to seduce his wife and was condemned to the eternal fire of Tartarus, which is hell. So it is very obvious to see that there are many parallels between Lear and him, mainly in their title and the fact that they both go mad. It's almost poetic that they should endure the same fate. And there are also echoes of Dante's Inferno where evil souls are punished eternally. And last passage, lines 34 to 36, Cordelia says, mine injurer's meanest dog, though he had bit me, should have stood that night against my fire. So this is a hypothetical statement that resembles a proverb. To say it simply, Cordelia is saying that during that terrible night with the storm, she would have sheltered even the most abject and horrible companion of her enemy. So it is hyperbolic and shows how cruel Regan and Goneril were, that they had no pity whatsoever, even for their own father. That underscores how much more open one should be to their father also. It brings forward Cordelia's kind nature, one that contrasts greatly with that of her two sisters. She seems to be reasoning about herself, but is really talking about Lear's situation. So in putting herself in this place, she is also suffering with him, with Lear. In what she says, her own goodness and loyalty become apparent, as it does when she makes friends go to England to help put Lear back in power.
As well as a great deal of suffering, as a great deal of pain, Lear's suffering has brought about a lot of weakness that is born from madness and old age. And this weakness is very visible in the contrasting view that Lear and Cordelia have of Lear himself. Throughout the passage, Lear repeats, I'm an old, foolish man. And the fact that he repeats it shows how much he believes what Goneril and Regan have said about him. And he also says, pray do not mock, do not laugh at me, which shows that Lear believes he has become a laughing stock, and he's become ridiculous, which is particularly interesting in this scene because it's one of the scenes where he is the least ridiculous in his madness. I'm thinking mainly of other scenes where he tears his clothes off or he runs about in the field with knights following him. By opposition with this, Cordelia sees him as he used to be, as a king and as her leader and as her lord. Throughout the whole extract, she says, or she refers to him as royal lord, as majesty, as sir. And obviously all these terms have a positive connotation and show a large amount of respect, and that it shows that she still sees him as a figure of authority. In fact, she almost seems to see him as more of a king, because at one point at line 57, she says, hold your hands in benediction over me. And obviously the term benediction has a religious connotation, almost spiritual, and it gives Lear a certain sacred or divine quality. The view of the character of Lear contrasts with how Lear sees himself at the beginning of the play. At the beginning of the play, he sees himself as a king and as strong and as powerful. However, during this scene, he sees himself as Regan and Goneril have seen him. Cordelia, who has been absent throughout this, still sees him as she saw him at the beginning, as her king and as a figure of authority. Another element that proves Lear's weakness is the fact that even though Cordelia sees him as a king, she still pities him and sees that he is old and mad. at line 28, she says, had you not been their father, these white flakes had challenged pity of them. So what she's saying is essentially that had Lear not been Goneril and Regan's father, his old age and his appearance and his white hair would have, and his vulnerability would have made anyone pity him. But because they were his daughters and they were cruel, they did not. Once again, this shows the difference between Cordelia and her sisters. Cordelia also mentions that Lear is still far wide, and by this she means that his state of mind is far away from what it used to be and what it should be. She's essentially saying that he is very far gone and he is very far down the road of madness and he is completely insane. And the fact that this is mentioned in an exclamatory sentence emphasizes what is being said.
That's 8 minutes.
So in conclusion,
That's 8 minutes.
Okay, so we have seen 24, more specifically lines 122 to 170 of King Lear. So right before, basically this scene is the confrontation between Edgar and Edmund. So it's the duel because Edmund has done such despicable actions. Right before, we can see that Albany sounds trumpets to urge someone to defy Edmund, and that's when Edgar steps up to defy his brother. So in this excerpt, we can see that justice is bound to be served in favor of the righteous, and this is mainly highlighted by Shakespeare's use of diction and by his depiction of the characters.
So I'm going to start by speaking about this depiction of the characters, more specifically about their attitude and about their evolution for some of the characters. So beginning by the less important characters in this excerpt, Goneril and Albany. Goneril is clearly the least righteous of the two. She's absolutely not righteous. And Albany is on the better side. Goneril here loses her power and loses confidence. She becomes very desperate to defend Edmund after he's vanquished, and still tries to establish her power but does not completely succeed. We see at line 146 that after Edmund is vanquished, she says, "This is mere practice, Gloucester. By the law of arms thou art not bound to answer an unknown opposite." So first of all, she calls Edmund Gloucester, trying to convince herself that Edmund is the true noble Gloucester, the real Earl of Gloucester. And she's also trying to find excuses for him by saying that this is mere practice, which means that Edgar has simply tricked him. Later on, at line 153, she also tries to establish her laws and her way of governing by saying, "Say, Padu, the laws are mine, not thine." However, this power that she's trying to impose does not succeed at all, as she's completely shut down by Albany's confidence. So Albany here is the righteous character, and he stops her speech by saying, "Stop your mouth, dame, or with this paper shall I stopple it," at line 150. So he speaks to her very rudely, very harshly, especially by saying, "Stop your mouth," since he knows that he's in the right and that justice will be served in favor of him. He also refers to a paper, which is the letter proving that Goneril is disloyal to him, and so he has concrete proof that Goneril is in the wrong. At line 155, he also says, "most monstrous," in response to her, which is a word with a very negative connotation, and shows once again his confidence that he's in the right. We can also see in the pair of characters, Edgar and Edmund, that confidence is attributed to the characters who are more just and righteous. So Edgar is very confident, as we can see at line 136, when he says, "This sword, this arm, and my best spirits are bent to prove upon thy heart, whereto I speak, thou liest." Here he's speaking to Edgar, and he's sure that he's going to win the fight. He's absolutely confident that Edmund is lying, especially by ending his speech with the simple words, "thou liest." Edmund, on the other hand, has a complete change in attitude throughout over the excerpt. At the beginning, he's very confident, but at the end, he's completely destroyed. So at the beginning, when Edgar asks, "What's he that speaks for Edmund, Earl of Gloucester?" Edmund replies, "Himself," at line 122. So here we see that he's very arrogant, especially concerning his title, the Earl of Gloucester, one that he didn't even earn legitimately. At lines 144 and 145, he also says, "This sword of mine shall give them instant way, where they shall rest forever." So with his use of diction here, he absolutely believes that he's going to win the fight and that Edgar will die. However, as we see very soon, he's very vanquished. He's vanquished by Edgar, and he's completely destroyed, and his confidence is lost. He then admits his faults and his wrongdoings, saying at line 158, "What you have charged me with, that I have done, and much more." Alex will elaborate on this point.
Yeah, so Edmund, as Gab said, finally admits his faults. So probably the best excerpt for this is on lines 169 to 170. The quote is, "Thou hast spoke truth, the wheel is come full circled, I am here." So basically, he admits that Edgar was right and righteous all along, and also the idea of full circle is really symbolic because a circle it's a cycle, so that means that everything comes back to its original state, and in this case, the situation is coming back to the regular state where Edgar is the proper son and Edmund is simply the bastard. So there's also more concrete evidence of justice being in favor of the righteous in the duel itself, where Edgar clearly wins the fight against Edmund. So in the stage directions, it's written in flourish, they fight, Edmund is vanquished. So obviously it's clear as day that Edmund loses, but even more so, then everybody shouts, "Save him, save him." And in this case, we can clearly see that because everybody's trying to save him, even his enemies are trying to save him. This shows the extent of his wounds and of Edgar's clear superiority in this situation, because even Albany jumps up to try to maybe do damage control on his situation. Now, Edgar defines righteousness as not being about appearance, but about being related to somebody's interior qualities. So this is mostly as a way for him to accuse Edmund. So from lines 128 to 135, he goes as follows. I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously. "Thy strength, youth, place, and eminence, despite thy victor's sword and fire new fortune, thy valor and thy heart, thou art a traitor." And then he even goes to say that he's a most toad-spotted traitor. So basically, here Edmund is literally compared to a frog, so to an animal. And even though at the beginning of the extract of the quote, Edgar seemed to be nice to Edmund and to give state qualities, in reality he was just preparing the field to destroy him even more with the abrupt idea of "thou art a traitor." And this shows in this case how Edmund is unrighteous and Edgar is always loyal and righteous. Then the gods are brought into cause. So Edgar starts saying on line 166 to 167, the gods are just, and our pleasant vices make instruments to scourge us. So for Edgar, the importance of justice is such that even the gods are mingling in the justice. So obviously, in the context of the play in the 15 to 1600s, the name of gods is not, especially from Edgar, who is a righteous character, the name of God is not used lightly, and it adds to the seriousness of the situation. So in this case, it's symbolic because it means that for Edgar, righteousness is important.
So finally, to conclude, one of the most important points in this excerpt is that Edmund's character drastically deteriorates, both physically and psychologically. So physically, he's defeated by Edgar in the duel, and psychologically, we see his confidence from the beginning of the scene of the excerpt that's completely reduced, and at the end, he admits his faults, being faced with unequivocal proof that he's a traitor. And here we see that it's the first time that Edmund is really vulnerable. We also see that justice is served in favor of the more righteous through the attitudes of the other characters in the excerpt. So Edgar and Albany, who are both very confident, and Goneril, who is losing her power. Finally, the conflict between the brothers and the issue, the separation between nature and non-nature, as well as the rift between appearance and the true self, has been completely resolved, and the brothers have returned to their original state. As Edmund mentions, they've gone full circle, so Edgar is back to being the noble son, and Edmund is nothing more than a bastard.
Two for all. You have 12 minutes.
So, like, you guys mentioned for the righteousness part, do you believe that, in general in this play, Shakespeare tried to, let's say, he didn't try to make characters that were very complex morally, as in there were characters that were very much like evil and like, and there were characters that were always like good and righteous. Do you think this is a division that he makes for the most part in the play?
For the most part, I think yes. So the major characters, like Goneril and Regan, we see that they're clearly on the bad side, and Cordelia, we see that she's clearly on the right side. But there's also some characters that are a little bit more in the gray area, like Albany, for example, who starts off being like an accomplice to Goneril in her actions.
For Albany, I don't think so, because I think Albany was more left out of the situation, because, for example, when they pluck out Gloucester's eyes,
Yeah.
he doesn't know. He's been left out of that, and when he finds out, he is clearly, he's clearly surprised and outraged.
Opposed to it.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, he doesn't really try to help Lear that much. It's more near the end that we see his true, like, just self coming out.
Once he's been able to see, like, his wife's terrible, like, actions.
He
Yeah.
must have been able to see what she was before, even though she hadn't quite fully acted out. Like, her nature is still fairly visible to me. Or in the way that she flatters Lear and so does Regan, you know, that she's still like, not necessarily as evil as she is clearly at the end, but she still wasn't a good, nice person at the beginning.
Yeah, talking about the whole thing with Lear believing his daughters at the start, I think that sort of ties into the whole infantilization that you mentioned.
Infantilization.
Yeah, thank you. That word is that he mentioned during his presentation, because I believe in part the reason why Lear might have believed everything that Goneril and Regan said, despite being, well, very much lying, is because he still saw them as his children, and so it's basically he still saw them as children who cannot lie or betray his father in a way that they would do afterwards in the play. So I think this infantilization of the daughters and sort of helps to explain why Lear believed everything that Regan and Goneril said at the start.
But also the idea that, well, you see that we were infantilizing the daughters, but also I think like it could be argued that Lear is a child himself in the idea, okay, he is naive, definitely. I mean, his daughters are plotting in front of him and he doesn't realize it for a long time. And also the way he goes mad and throws tantrums every time something doesn't really work out for him. So I think that point could be made.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I saw him more of like a child, like 4-year-old child who didn't want to, like, he thinks he's always right. The world is still like his world. So every time someone says something to him that he's not, like, he's that goes against what he thinks, he's gonna react completely in just disproportionate way. So that's why he completely reacts like, you can see when you see a child and you don't give him a toy, or you say something like go to bed, like as you said, go to bed because he doesn't get candy or anything. It's not, like he exactly reacts like that kid who would say, I don't care what adults say, I don't care what other people say, I'm the only one who's right. So that's why he always stays on his own point of view, and he never listens to them until they make this huge case and become really mean to him. And that's the only time he starts to maybe listen.
Like, given that Lear is like a terrible, terrible king, and apparently, and okay, we can like, it is possible that he has also been like a terrible father and a terrible ruler of his subject to push like his daughters to commit like the atrocities that they have committed. Like in the like as it is presented in this play, like the daughters and the daughters are the bad guys, but like maybe just given that they had to praise like their fathers often just to receive his favor, maybe like they have had some reasons to do what they have done.
Also going back to the childish behavior, I find it kind of ironic because Regan and Goneril both blame his behavior on him being old, like on him being an old man who's completely foolish, whereas the reader kind of sees it more as a completely naive child who's very innocent. And it's also ironic since old people should have more wisdom, technically speaking, and yeah.
Well, it's the whole circle of life thing. It's how when you're very, very old, you become like a child, basically, where everyone has to take care of you and you can't think clearly. So I think it sort of could be tied into that.
I also think the thing you said about wisdom, it might also show that he's never really lived in the real world. Like, he seems surprised when he goes outside and he's like, oh my god, everything's so terrible, why did I never do anything about this? And so it seems like his vision and what he knows about the world is very restricted, and that might also contribute to his lack of wisdom.
Just like an overprotected child,
Yeah.
who could be. And I like the fact that he's in the play. He's acting so foolishly, and just like an actual man would do. Like he's going insane, and like if you look at old people, sometimes they're still attached to the past, so they tend to not they tend to be frightened by like all the evolution we have, especially right now. They tend to be more old time and stay with the old culture and not agree with new things.
Well, as like to add to your point, a specific example would be when he is with poor Bedlam Tom outside, and there's a storm, and he can't possibly imagine someone in his kingdom not having like the best clothes to be protected in the storm. And for him, it's a shock, and for the fact that he first sees poverty as an old man, obviously makes him a bad ruler, because how can you possibly like take care of your country when you don't even know what that country is about?
Well, for that probably just relates to the time period where this was created, where at that time, like, kings weren't necessarily supposed to get in contact with the common people. For the most part, they were just supposed to, like, rule the kingdom and live in their palaces while all the rest
Yeah,
of the people.
but they still knew it existed. Like, they did everything for themselves or like their friends and the court. But the reason why they didn't mix with common people, it's because they knew there were common people.
Well,
Yeah.
and the role of a king is to protect their kingdom and to make it prosperous and make sure that everybody's being treated in a just way. So the fact that Lear only finds this out at the end of his life when he's not really a ruler anymore is...
I feel like it is really at the end of the novel that Lear finally gets wise in a sense. He finally comes out of his foolishness and realizes all the bad things that he has done wrong, and how he has treated his Cordelia very poorly, and he feels great sorrow that in return of his poor treatment, Cordelia treats him with all the respect that it is due, and treats him like his father and wants to take back his throne.
I found the link between what both of you guys said, that you said that Edgar and Gloucester believe in nature, but Edmund doesn't, and you said the same thing about God. I think it shows that there's a parallel between nature and like divine retribution and intervention, which, well, it's very interesting. I find it's also represented in the fact that when Lear goes into the storm and he's angry, he tells nature to sort of be just and destroy everyone, which is linking to what you guys said about God supporting justice and making Edgar kill Edmund and stuff.
Well, in the quote that I actually used, it's the gods are just. So that's how, that's the conclusion. Yeah.
And as you said, you said that Edmund was like he was the wrong one and he lost his confidence in everything. And at the same time, we can see that the gods always. You said also the gods and the justice is always right and for the righteous people. So maybe that's why Edmund doesn't believe in the nature controlling their lives thing, because he since he's wrong, he believes that it's only himself that can really, he thinks he's above everyone, he's able to manipulate everyone. So that's why the gods are against him, and he thinks that nature cannot control him or his behavior.
I like how we all develop how Edmund evolved and the way he thinks, but I think that it would also be interesting to analyze Edgar's evolution, because in the beginning he's portrayed as a very gullible character who doesn't really have. He hides from Gloucester and then he runs away from his problems, let's say. And at the end, during the duel, we can see that he has like a lot more determination, and he's a man that fights for his values, I suppose. So, yeah. I think
the fact that he saw his father being tortured, like burn something into him, and he started to become more responsible and defend his father and his family, because what happened was I don't know, I think it lit up something.
Well, yeah, well, we can see that when the first, let's say, responsible thing he does in the story is when he finds his father with no eyes, just bleeding out of his eye socket, and he goes to help him in whatever way he can. So, and part, I do agree with Gabriel that maybe seeing his father like suffer the way he did might have driven him to become more responsible and involved as a character.
But Sebastian, you were saying at the beginning, well, you actually asked at the beginning of this if we think that all the characters are one, or like black or white or like righteous or not. And honestly, I think Edgar, it could be argued that he's not totally righteous, because I mean, he finds his father and he could totally tell his father that it's him when he finds him, but he decides to still hide and to still kind of lie to him. It's in the scene after the Dover cliff when.
But at the same time, I think Edgar is considering Gloucester's feeling, because if Gloucester knows that he's actually there, he would be so devastated. Like at the end, I think that Gloucester actually died of remorse by knowing that Edgar was there. So that's why he decided not to reveal himself.
Like, that's why I think he doesn't evolve as a character. I think he's just loyal to his father. So at the beginning, he's loyal, and he just runs away because he doesn't want to confront his father. Then at the end, he confronts Edgar because he's loyal to his father and wants to avenge him. And he's also like, his loyalty makes him not want to sort of, well, kill, I guess, his father by telling people who he is.
And the slang is not malicious. It's out of, like,
No.
yeah, exactly. So still, I don't think he is like that bad of a character. I think still he's portrayed as being like a good guy.
No, I agree. It's just weird using lying as something completely negative, usually as in the best possible, well, like in a positive, good intentioned way.
I feel like in this play, like the people who believe in nature are people who are kind of like privileged, that already have everything. Like King Lear, he's the king of England. Gloucester, he's the hero, and the people who do not believe believe in nature, just such as Edmund. He's a bastard, like he doesn't have anything. We think that the people who got the trick are the bad guys, but like they just sit on the throne and believe everything